Welcome to Homestyle Woodcrafts. My name is James, and today we're going to be talking about the basics of measuring and marking wood for your woodcraft projects. Now, in a typical shop, you're going to be finding a lot of tools that can be used for measuring wood, such as the carpenter square, also known as a speed square. You'll find a steel square. Here's one I really like, combination square. You might even measure pieces of wood with other standard pieces of wood that you've already measured to length. You might use a ruler that you find in your kitchen. There's also precision calipers for making very fine measurements. But today we're going to be talking about one of my favorites, the tape measure. All right, so let's look at some of the features of the tape measure. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to be looking at the Stanley Dual Lock 16-foot tape measure, and also an older one I have, the Stanley Power Lock 2 16-foot tape measure. I'm going to show you a little bit of the differences between them. So first of all, we've got the housing, and that's just what the tape resides in. On the top, we have the lock right here. And so how this works is when you pull the tape out, you hit the lock and it keeps the tape in place. Now, this is a feature that varies by tape measure. So for example, on this one, if you don't lock it in place, it retracts. On the dual lock, there's a mid setting where it holds it in place, but you could kind of push it in, or you push the lock down and it's a much firmer grab. On the back, you have the clip. And what this is for is to hang it on your belt or on your pocket for convenience when you're not using it, but it's right there to grab when you need it. Now, this has something interesting about this is if you don't want the clip, you can unscrew this little screw right here and take the clip off, and then it can just slide into your pocket, or if you've got a work belt on that you just want to set it in, you can do that. So the next, we have the tape itself, okay? And so you'll see the different markings. Now these are inch markings, so obviously 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch. And then we've got the big long line in the middle, that's a 1/2 inch. And then the next smaller line's a 1/4 inch. And then I have an 1/8 inch and then a 1/16 inch. So each one of these, the gap between each one of these is a 1/16 of an inch. On this tape, conveniently, you can see that the fractions are marked, but that's not always the case. This is the only one of my tape measures that has this. For example, you'll see on this other tape measure, it just has the lines, but without the fractions on the actual tape. Now there are other markings. So for example, right here, we've got the foot mark, and that's repeated every foot. There's the 2-foot mark. You'll also see this red mark at 16 inches. What that is that's for construction, and that indicates the distance between studs in a wall. And then you'll see this little diamond at just after the 19-inch mark. And that is another construction measurement at 19.2 inches that's used for certain joists in flooring and trusses and roofing. But I've never used those. I just use the typical inch and foot measurements. On some tape measures, there's additional information on the back. So that's kind of interesting. On my other tape measure, there's nothing. Another interesting feature is this is the convex shape of the tape. You can see that it's kind of curved. And the purpose for that is so that it maintains its rigidity as you extend the tape, which is handy if you're measuring something that's out of arm's length. And then finally, we've got the hook at the end of the tape. You see that right there? It's a little bit loose, and that's okay. That's the way it's built, and there's a specific purpose for that. This hook is what you hook onto your piece of wood to measure, like that. That hook grabs on there. So those are the basic features of a measuring tape. All right, so let's do a little demonstration of a simple marking job. Now, for today's purposes, I'm going to be using this Sharpie to mark the wood, but that's to make it easier for you to see the markings. Normally, I would use something with more of a precision point, like a pencil, and you might use a mechanical pencil sometimes, or I use this carpenter's pencil. If you use a carpenter's pencil, it's got a broad edge, so I would sharpen it up, and I often do that with just a utility knife that I've got in my tool bag. I might have a pen laying around, I'll do that. I've even used screws and nails to make a scribe mark, just a scratch in the wood. And then I don't do this typically, but other people use knives to make a very precision point. So let's go ahead and take a measurement. So I'm going to set the hook down here into place. And I'm going to lock it down so that the tape doesn't retract on me if the hook becomes dislodged. And I'm going to mark it at 3.5 inches. So I'll just make a simple line here right at 3.5 inches. Sometimes I'll do a little V shape with the point pointing down right at the measurement I want. So then I'll take the tape off and I'll find something that will give me a square marking on the wood. And I've got this little combination square. And I'm going to put my point down, make sure I've got a good square mark there. And for the V, I'll find that point and do the same thing. And there you have your mark. And then you can cut your wood. Now, sometimes you may be marking or measuring where you need to measure in a corner, and often you'll measure doing this and putting that corner in the corner. And I've done that a lot, and it's doable. But if you want something more precise than that, you can actually just butt this into the corner, because this is a known length. On the tape measures I have, it will indicate it right here how long that length is. In this case, it's 3 inches. So that's another really handy feature that's printed on the housing. So I mentioned earlier that this hook moves, and some people will think that means it's broken or defective, but that's not the case. It allows you to do interior and exterior measurements. So I've got a little square piece here. So the hook is, you have to account for the width of the hook. It's a 1/16 of an inch wide. And if it didn't move, if you were measuring interior measurement versus exterior, you could get a 1/16 of an inch off. But what happens is when you push it against the interior, it accounts for that 1/16 of an inch in your measurement, because you're measuring on the outside of the hook. When you do an exterior measurement, you're measuring from the interior of the hook, but because it's loose, it pulls out, and then again it counts for that. So that eliminates any error due to whether you're measuring on the inside of your piece or the outside of your piece. Another handy feature is this little hole right here. What's in the hook. And that's handy for two reasons. So let's say I've got a screw and a piece of wood or a nail, and the nail and the screw will have a head on them. And so what this does is it will catch that head. And so number one, it's something to grab onto you as you extend your tape. The other nice thing about that is if you're really wanting a precise measurement, that allows you to measure against the shaft, see that right there, instead of the head, which could be, in this case, a 1/16 or 2 difference. So another advantage. So that's the basics of operating a tape measure. All right, so earlier I talked about the concave shape of the tape, and what this allows you to do is extend the tape out far beyond your arm's reach, so you can grab onto stuff and measure from the hook. So that's really handy. In tape measures, you'll find a variety of elements. Of course, there's different brands. You'll find them in different lengths. I've got a 25 foot. This is a 16 foot, which I find meets most of my needs. Differences in price based on feature and brand. This one will run you 10 to 15 bucks. You might find some that, as I mentioned earlier and demonstrated, there's information on the back side of the tape. So when you go shopping for a tape measure, just kind of look at the features that are available and the models that you're looking at and make a choice. This is pretty standard, and it's met my needs. So a word on maintenance. These are pretty maintenance free. Other than keeping it clean and dry, there's really not much you need to do with it. If you work in mud or wet things a lot, you might want to dedicate a tape measure for that kind of work, and then keep one for cleaner work. Also, with the tape measure, you want to make sure that you don't bend it. Once there's a permanent bend in the tape, it can really hinder your ability to use it effectively. So just be really careful about that. Don't let anybody sword fight with them. Regarding safety is a big thing with me. What I tell people is there's no project I'm more interested in than keeping my own fingers. So with power tools especially, safety is an important consideration. And so in everything I do, I think about the safety aspect. But tape measures are very safe. The only thing I'd caution you about is when you retract it, I wouldn't run your finger along the edge of it, just in case. It's a great introductory tool for kids because they are safe and they get to measure things. They'll have a lot of fun with them, and they can come work with you on your projects. It's a great introductory tool. And then finally, I want to talk about precision a little bit. As you work with wood and make your cuts, the more precise they are, the better the fit will be at the end of your project when you assemble everything. So the old adage, measure twice, cut once, really is true. Take time when you measure to get it right, and you'll be very happy with the end result. So hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you have, we invite you to subscribe to our channel and watch our other videos. So be creative, have fun, and we'll see you next time.